Welcome back to State of the Association. I'm your host, Nash Roberts. We've got some individual performances to talk about today, like Hat dropping 44. We've got NBA players who I think would thrive in different environments, especially championship contenders, and a lot more on today's episode of State of the Association. Thank you for listening. I'm your host, Nash Roberts. It's going to be a fun episode. Happy Halloween. This episode today, Dennis Schroder has been absolutely cooking for the Brooklyn Nets to start off the season. Right now he's averaging 24.6 points, 8.2 assists. I would be shocked if those averages stay up, but it's just a measurement of how well he's been performing so far. Now, I'm an absolute Dennis Schroder truther. I believe he's one of the more underrated point guards in this league, one of the most underappreciated point guards in the entire league, and I think he can add a lot of value to any team, especially when looking to win championships, and he's not a good fit with the Brooklyn Nets for that reason. The Nets, they are just they're stuck in the middle. They aren't really fully committed to a rebuild with their roster the way it's set up right now, but they're also not just fully, they're not going anywhere in terms of the playoffs either, so they have a lot of work to do with their roster, and I think that might involve trading away Dennis Schroder, especially right now. His value is super high with the way that he's been playing. And any team, I feel like, especially one that looks to win a championship this year, I think they could absolutely use a guy like Dennis Schroder. He could be in the same vein as Drew Holiday in terms of a defensive point that doesn't do too much for you on offense, and that's okay. He doesn't need to, because you can surround him with other guys on offense that are able to take a load off of him. And if you do ask Schroder to do some stuff on offense, I think he's a very talented offensive player. It's just a matter of he's not necessarily the guy that you want always taking the last shot. And that's okay. He doesn't need to be. I think he's one of the best perimeter defenders in the league at the point guard position, especially for his size at just 6'1". He's a really quick player. He uses that speed to his advantage. Absolutely. He's real shifty. He's a great floor raiser. He doesn't really have many weaknesses either in terms of, his defense is good despite his 6'1" frame. And he's not the best shooter, but he's still not a net negative in that area. So Schroder doesn't really do a lot wrong. The one negative you could kind of have for him is that he might play hero ball sometimes. However, on the team that he's on right now, he's kind of got to play hero ball, because who else is? Cam Thomas, right? You've got two bucket getters on that team. One of them's going to be playing a little bit of hero ball. So I think that if Schroder went to an environment where he didn't always have to be the guy that's putting up 25 and 8 right now, if he didn't have to do that, then I think the general consensus on him would be that he's not necessarily this guy that's going to play hero ball, that he can be more of a winning player, because I think he absolutely can be. He has no proper weaknesses. He's at minimum a floor raiser. I think he can absolutely raise your ceiling as well, though. I think he can be a very valuable player to a winning basketball team. It's a shame he's on the Nets right now. He's getting to cook. He's putting up the production all right. But in terms of actually contributing and impacting the game, I don't think he's best suited as a Brooklyn Net. And overall for the Brooklyn Nets, it's just a sign that they do need to fully commit to a rebuild. And Dennis Schroder is not the guy to really have during that rebuild. I think he could go somewhere and be a valuable piece on a championship team. No doubt in my mind about that. He's a great player and has been off to a tear Brooklyn Net and Dennis Schroder. How about a former Brooklyn Net and Jarrett Allen, who is one of the most underappreciated centers in the entire league? He just scored 20 points and 17 rebounds to put the now 5-0 Cleveland Cavaliers over the Los Angeles Lakers. The thing about Jarrett Allen right now in his current situation over in Cleveland is that his play style is too similar to Evan Mobley for both of them to really be out there and reach their full potential in terms of what they can do on the floor. Because him and Evan Mobley, they're not great force spacers, but they're very good rim protectors and have a good post game. But you can't have your power forward and center both trying to just be in the post. This is the modern era. It's all really reliant on spacing. And you can't have two guys that really do much of the same stuff. It just doesn't really work for the Cleveland Cavaliers, and that's what we've seen from the past couple of years. So I think Jarrett Allen or Evan Mobley, they would thrive if they were able to go somewhere else. Most likely, that would be Jarrett Allen. It's the same thing in the Cavs backcourt in terms of Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell not complimenting each other, but being just too much of a little bit of the same player. Small guards who aren't the best on defense, but hey, they can get you a bucket. It's the same kind of thing there. But for Jarrett Allen, he has been a very good to great center in the league for years now. And I don't think he gets a lot of attention for it, as I think he is deserving of. the thing about him that I really think of when I think of Jarrett Allen is really consistency. And I know there was that moment a couple years ago when the Cavaliers failed in the playoffs, and the lights the lights were brighter than expected was his quote. But in general, when I think of Jarrett Allen, I think of consistency because he typically puts up pretty good numbers, but he doesn't have any, he's not dropping 40 points in this one game. And I think a lot of times, right, with highlight culture, in the way that NBA will post the little box scores of the winners of each night, I think the way that kind of is the way that casual fans can digest the game if they aren't actually watching it. The fact that, they'll just go on the NBA's page or they'll watch the game highlights. There's a place for that for sure. But in terms of evaluating a guy like Jarrett Allen, that's not the best place to be. Because you might have a guy like D-Mitch on the Cavs score 40, and that's no hate on D-Mitch. I love him. He's one of my favorite players in the entire league. But you might have Donovan Mitchell score 40, and, that's the thing that gets posted on the NBA because that's the guy who had, the best box score. However, then, there might be Jarrett Allen who had a double-double, and he's been consistently doing that throughout the season. But it doesn't get posted as much because his numbers aren't as eye-popping for a certain night because he's just doing that thing every single night. And he's been a consistently solid center for the Cavs. And I think just the way that highlight culture and all that in terms of how the casual fan digests the game, I think it is a negative in terms of how we perceive Jarrett Allen. And I think he's a very underappreciated center for that reasoning because he's just really consistent. Even even though he may have had some playoff lows, overall, at least in the regular season, he is a very valuable, very good contributing player and very consistent in what he does. And as a result of that, sometimes he doesn't always pop up in terms of highlight culture. But hey, he in his own right is a great center. And Jarrett Allen, I think he deserves some more respect around the league, especially from casual NBA fans. I think a lot of what he does isn't recognized just because of the fact that it's night in, night out, not the most eye-popping numbers. However, he is a very valuable center in this league. And it's also just a matter of the Cleveland Cavaliers. He's not a great fit there because him and Evan Mobley, they don't complement each other the best. But you put him in a new environment, Jarrett Allen's going to do wonders. He's a great center. The trend of centers right now, let's talk about Nick Richards. He put up 24 points, 14 rebounds as the Charlotte Hornets advanced to now a 2-2 record. Now, Nick Richards isn't really a guy that you can project a high ceiling for at this point because of his age. He's 26 years old. But I think that he is a really good center for the Charlotte Hornets, and a lot of the attention gets taken away from him because they have another even better center in Mark Williams. Now, I'm not going to argue that at this point Mark Williams has a higher upside because he absolutely does. And I think it's just more so a disservice to Nick Richards that we don't mention him enough for what he's done the past 2 years especially. He's played 65-plus games in both years. That first year he averaged 8 points, 6 boards. Then last year was almost 10 points and 8 rebounds. And those are the first years that he's really got minutes because his first 2 years with Charlotte, he wasn't really getting many minutes. And, with a guy like Mark Williams, he's dealt with injuries for the Charlotte Hornets at the center position. Well, he might have the higher upside. When he's dealt with injuries, Nick Richards has been able to get more minutes, and he's come in, and he's consistently produced. He's been a really solid center for him. And this year, he's actually averaging 13.5 points and 11.8 rebounds on 30 minutes a game. Now, I don't think Nick Richards is going to ever be a star in this league, especially because he's 26. He's just now really coming into his prime as an NBA player, and as a result, you can't project much more for him than what he's doing right now. However, I think Nick Richards has the capability to be a really good center for pretty much any team, and Charlotte Hornets aren't going to be that. I think he can be a good low-end to middling starter, and that's not a disservice to him to say he's going to be a low-end to middling starter, because 99% of basketball players in the world, they would aspire to be a low-end starter in the NBA. So for Nick Richards to even do that, that's great. I think that he is a very underrated center in this league, and he can be a quality backup too behind Mark Williams. But for the Charlotte Hornets, you're not really going anywhere at this point, right? I think Nick Richards could do a lot in terms of a win-now team. The Charlotte Hornets have a great rebuild going on around Mark Williams, around Brandon Miller, and around LaMelo Ball. However, I think that Nick Richards, with the fact that he's 26 years old and just really entering his peak right now, I think that he could go to a team that's looking to contend and be a good piece, much like I said for Dennis Schroder earlier. because here's a guy that's just now really exiting his prime in terms of age. Nick Richards is just now entering it. These are both guys that I think could go to a championship team, and Nick Richards could be a really quality backup for a championship team. What I'm saying here is I think Charlotte is a bad situation for him because on a low-end team like Hornets are, and that's not a bad thing because they're rebuilding. That's kind of their goal at this point, just to develop the young guys. On a low-end team like the Hornets, Nick Richards, I think, would serve best as a starter, but he's not going to be a starter because Mark Williams is there. But I think Nick Richards, if he really wants to, just put up production, he needs to be a starter on a low-end team. However, as a quality backup, which he's being right now for the Hornets, he's better served on a championship contender. And so I would love to see Nick Richards go somewhere like the Celtics, who could use some depth. I would love to see Nick Richards over there. And I think he can be a quality backup center on a lot of teams in the league, especially ones looking to have championship aspirations. I think Nick Richards can be really good for those teams. And I would love to see him on somewhere like the Boston Celtics. Not that they need much help, though. They've got a stacked roster already. And, Kristaps, he deals with injuries, so it might even be the same thing if Nick Richards is able to come in and be a low-end starter if he was to go to Boston. And, hey, that's perfectly okay because you got Drew Holiday, you got Derek White, you got Jaylen Brown, you got JT around him. So, Nick Richards, I think the Celtics would be a great fit for him in terms of if he had to be a low-end starter while Kristaps was hurt, or if he was just that quality backup, which I think he could thrive in for Boston. And he's doing that now in Charlotte, but they're not going anywhere in terms of where Nick Richards can really help you. I think he can help his championship contender, and I would love to see him go somewhere else. Giannis Antetokounmpo could force his way out of Milwaukee if things went awry for the Bucks. Here's the quote: "There's a rising sense of confidence that if things go badly in Milwaukee, that Giannis could be available for trade, would really force his way out of Milwaukee in the next year." End quote. And I've been a strong advocate for loyalty in the NBA and also for Giannis specifically to stick with the Bucks, not just from a loyalty standpoint, but because they have done what they think is best in terms of building a championship roster around him by bringing a guy like Dame in. But ultimately, that has not worked out. And also the head coaching change, Doc Rivers has not been the best head coach for them. So the Bucks, they've had some organizational failures as of late. And these rumors have to be coming from somewhere. There are the rumors back in 2020 that Giannis might be unhappy with the situation with the Bucks. He might look to leave. He ultimately won a championship there in 2021. However, these rumors, for there to be so many rumors about Giannis leaving the Bucks, they've got to be coming from somewhere. And as a result, there is probably some truth to this, that Giannis could look to force his way out of Milwaukee if things end badly and it's yet another disappointing season. Because the Bucks, it feels like just recently, it's been disappointment after disappointment over the last couple of years, ever since that championship run, really. Whether it was that first-round exit to the Miami Heat or the Dame trade not working out and hiring Doc Rivers mid-season to not even scratch 50 wins after starting off 30-13 with your prior head coach. The Bucks have consistently put forward effort in terms of trying to build a good team around Giannis and creating the right environment and structure with the team via head coaching, via the roster around him, but it hasn't worked out. And all these ideas, they can be great on paper, but we've got to see results, and that's what we have not seen, especially in the Dame Giannis era. And it's a shame that things haven't worked out, but at some point, the conversation on the front office does have to be, yes, you're doing all these things to try to build the right team around Giannis, but to this point, it really hasn't been much of a success especially since you got rid of Drew Holiday. He was really the glue that held this whole thing together, because Dame's liabilities on the defensive end have really showed and been a major problem during his stint with Milwaukee. And Drew Holiday, he's the antithesis of that. He is this great perimeter defender. And that paired well with Giannis's post defense. You can't get a shot up against those two. And the idea with Dame was that was just going to be such a great offensive duo that taking a step back on defense wouldn't be a big issue. And at least with Adrian Griffin, when he was a head coach for that team, at least, yeah, the defense was really bad for Milwaukee, but hey, at least you had the offensive identity between Dame and Giannis. But now you bring in Doc Rivers, and yes, the defense statistically has been better, but the team overall has been worse. And now you don't have much of an identity because the offense isn't great, the defense is middling, And I think you just set yourself up for even more mediocrity. So the Dame stint in Milwaukee with Giannis, I don't think it's going to, at this point, really lead to anything because I've been a strong believer that year 2 was going to be better. It hasn't really been to this point. The Bucks are 1-3. So, it's a real early start to the year. You're only 4 games in at this point. However, there are teams that had much lower expectations going into this year that have at least 2 wins, right? So for the Bucks, it looks like the Dame Giannis duo isn't going to really lead to a championship in Milwaukee as they had hoped, and the loss of Jrue Holiday has really affected them. And it's just been organizational failure after organizational failure with the Milwaukee Bucks in terms of trying to build a healthy team around Giannis. So at this point, as strong a believer as I've been for Giannis' loyalty to Milwaukee, I think that it's not implausible for him to force his way out of Milwaukee, especially with the fact that we've just heard so many rumors about teams being, eyeing his situation with Milwaukee to look to trade for him, and now this rumor coming out. At this point, it would not surprise me if Giannis was to leave the Milwaukee Bucks, and that is a result of organizational failure from the top down for Milwaukee. They have had good ideas in terms of what they tried to do, and there's credit for the effort for sure. But at some point, you've got to have results, and those has actually been off to a pretty good start to the year for the Chicago Bulls. Chicago is now 3-2, which is really par for the course, as a middling team that really needs to rebuild. But hey, they do have a winning record right now, and maybe that's not going to lead to much. But hey, it was a good win against the Magic as well. So credit to the Bulls for sure. They've got off to a solid start to the year in spite of, calls for them to go and rebuild. But for Giddey, he had 20 points, 11 rebounds, 5 assists, and 4 threes made. Now, obviously with Giddey, there is the off-the-court stuff as well that you can take into account in terms of how you view him as not just a player but a person. However, I think as a player, what we're going to analyze with Giddey today is that he really just needed a spot that fit for him, and that is definitely more so Chicago than it was the Thunder. Because Giddey, he doesn't do a ton on the basketball court, but one thing he can do, one thing he's really good at, he's a great passer. And the Oklahoma City Thunder, they've got Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and he's the one on the point. He's the one handling the ball, running the offense 90% of the time for the Thunder. So with Giddey, his main attribute being his passing, and he's not the best at a lot of other things. He's really not a great shooter, so, he can't really play off-ball. That limits his ability as an off-ball player to not be able to shoot. So for Giddey to just have more of an opportunity over in a place like Chicago, that's done wonders for him, and he's got off to a real good start to the year. And obviously with the Bulls, I believe the point guard of the future is no doubt Kobe White, and I think he is the guy to build around. But Josh Giddey can be a really solid player for this team. And I mentioned that 4 threes made specifically because as an off-ball player, if Kobe White was to be the guy at point guard for the Bulls, if Giddey's able to improve his shooting, he can be a more effective off-ball player. But at the same time, the reason the fit with the Bulls is better with Kobe White than it was in Oklahoma City with SGA is the fact that Kobe White, the offense isn't as Kobe-oriented as the Thunder were SGA-oriented. Now, the primary point guard is absolutely Kobe White. He's the guy moving forward for the Bulls. But he has experience playing shooting guard as well, so he is able to create off-ball opportunities for himself as well. And as a result, that allows Josh Giddey to sometimes handle those playmaking duties, and that's what he's really good at. So I think as a result, Giddey is going to be able to have more ball handling duties and do what he does best as a passer and really thrive in the Chicago offense. Now, is he a guy to build around with this young core? No, I think Ayo Dosunmu, and Kobe White are the 2 main pieces for the Bulls moving forward, and those are 2 backcourt members. So it really leaves Josh Giddey kind of out. However, I think that he can be a bright spot for the Bulls this season, as they may be fully committed to the rebuild. Maybe. We don't know at this point. DeMar's gone, but Zach LaVine's still there, Vuce is still there. That remains to be seen what the Bulls are going to do. But I think that this season for sure, Josh Giddey can really kind of try to hone his offensive game and become a more contributing NBA player. I think the Bulls are a good place for him to do that. We're going to talk about Karl-Anthony Towns had 44 points for the Knicks last night. And this is one of the most offensively talented big men in the entire league. And he gets a lot of flack for whether it's his playoff performances or his defense. And, just the general public kind of perceives him as a soft player. But when Towns is on, he's an amazing NBA player and one of the most offensively skilled centers that we've ever seen. The Knicks going to get him was a great move, even if they lost guys like Randall and DiVincenzo. Because the Knicks, their biggest issue really has kind of been the center, because Mitchell Robinson has dealt with injuries and he's solid, but Cat is a needle mover at the center position. And you add him to an already stacked lineup with guys like Jalen Brunson. That's a recipe for success. For Cat to be your second option, because really he's not going to be the number one option on a championship team, but as a number two, he can be great. We saw with Anthony Edwards last year. It's just kind of been an issue with playoff flows with him, but Julius Randle, on the other end, has had worse playoff performances than Cat. Cat more so struggles with inconsistency and fouls. Randall's just, his efficiency drops off a cliff. So I think Cat's issues are a little bit more manageable and coachable. And with a guy like Thibodeau, right? Cat played with Thibodeau not many years ago, but a few years ago. And Thibodeau is a huge culture guy. If Thibodeau did not like what Cat brought to the table and did not like the way that Cat would fit in with the culture of the Knicks, he would not have wanted Cat to be with him. And as a result, the GM may not have made that trade. So I think that Thibodeau trusts Cat, and I think when Cat is on, he's one of the best centers in the entire league. And he's just going to be, he's a huge addition for this Knicks team. And it took him a while to get started. Obviously, it's early in the season, but his game one especially, it wasn't too great for the Knicks, but he's really coming to his own now with his 44-point performance. I think he's going to be a great piece for the Knicks this year. One of the most offensively talented big men we've ever seen. Super skilled, one of the best shooting bigs ever, probably best shooting center ever. Big, it's a conversation between him and Dirk. But credit to Cat for, there's going to be a lot of noise in New York if you have even one bad game, especially for a player that is universally, I feel like, by NBA fans, not necessarily appreciated enough. The lights are always going to be on him whenever he does something negative. And as a result, you've just got to push through that. And I think it's just a testament to Cat's ability that he was able to push through that and have a great game for the Knicks. The stat doesn't apply anymore to one player, but until Dalton Knecht dropped 18, up to this point in the season, no rookie had scored 15-plus points or played 30-plus minutes. Now, Knecht broke that trend with his 18 points against the Cavs. However, Knecht is also probably the most polished NBA prospect in terms of age, experience, and just being an overall good scorer. So it's expected that he might be the first one to break that trend. Credit to him for that. But overall, for the draft class, having no one else score 15-plus points or play 30 minutes, it just kind of shows that this draft class, it's going to take time to develop. And this was a class that was really perceived as a weak draft class. And to this point, they have absolutely showed that. But I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. Over the past few years, especially, we've seen these super hyped up prospects come in and make an instant impact, whether it's Wemby, whether it's Anthony Edwards making strides in just his second year, whether it's Paul Banchero having a great third season, being Rookie of the Year, averaging 20 in that rookie season. We've had so many great rookies over the past couple of years that have come in and made instant impact, whether it is those stars like I mentioned, or whether it's just guys coming in and being real valuable role players. Whatever it might be, we haven't seen that from this draft class yet, and I think the prior draft classes kind of altered our perception that these guys are still rookies, and it's going to take time for them to develop to the NBA game. Because it's a whole different environment in the NBA than it was internationally or in college. And it's going to take time to adjust. So I think the rookies having a slow start to the year, that's not on them as much as it is to, hey, we just need time to develop these guys, because they aren't the most NBA-ready class that we've seen in recent years. And that's okay. We have a G League for that, to develop the young bucks. And we have just, practices over time, training with NBA players, with NBA head coaches. Over time, they will become better, and I don't think we should overreact and say, oh, they're all busts. I think over time, this draft class will be better. Is it going to be one of the weaker ones? Perhaps, because I would see a lot of high ceilings for a lot of these guys. But I think that in time, this class will turn out fine. and we've just been spoiled by recent years. And the fact that they've got off to a slow start and not even really been super contributing role players, I think with due time that they will be. And that might be in year 2, might be in year 3, might be in year 4. It might take a lot of time for some of these guys, but over time I think they will develop to be NBA players. And it's just recent draft classes have kind of altered our perception. And that's really always been the case. And this shows that it has been a weaker class. But I think just give them time. Don't overreact. Let the rookies develop, because the NBA is a whole different brand of basketball.
That is all for today's
episode of State of the Association. As always, I'm your host, Nash Roberts. Not my favorite episode today, but hey, we're trying to get better. I'm only 17 years old, trying to get in sports broadcasting, and it's going to be a process. But hey, by the time I'm out of college, this is going to be 6 years of talking about basketball, especially. So we're just trying to get better each and every single podcast. Thank you for tuning in. This is State of the Association. I'm your host, Nash Roberts.